In theory, there's no reason why Luminar should exist. There's no reason why I or any member of the team should have been able to build what we built. You have some of the largest technology companies and automotive companies on the planet that have been trying to solve this problem for the better part of a decade and beyond. But the fundamental aspect of it is you have to have that strategic vision, that level of innovation, that blank slate approach, and just pure drive, hours, everything that you need to put into it like no tomorrow to be able to successfully deliver and execute. And I think that's the reason why we exist, and that's the reason why some of the greatest technology companies of our generation exist as well. Founded the company about 8, almost 9 years ago with the vision to be able to build a new type of LiDAR sensing system from the ground up to be able to help enable the autonomous vehicle industry. And really had to build something entirely from scratch to meet the very stringent performance requirements, safety requirements, and scalability requirements that were needed to be able to see this industry become a reality. When you have to build something truly from the ground up, everything is a challenge. You know, it's and not a trivial one. You have to be able to ensure that you're successfully balancing all the different aspects of the business beyond the core technology developments. And to be able to successfully execute on that is something where you're still having to build the plane as it's taking off, you know, and because you have to really have that vision around where you can be. And of course, you know that if you don't get the technology to work, if you can't solve that risk and that problem, then you're done. It doesn't work. But at the end of the day, it's some motivational driver as well to make sure that you put in everything you got into making sure that it all happens and executes successfully. Building a hardware product that's extremely complex, and in the auto industry specifically, those are 3 very challenging things that you all have to combine. And at the time, I was like, 16, 17 years old, where I say, hey, imagine this pitch. I have this vision of creating a new type of laser system that will allow cars to be able to drive themselves, and we're going to beat out, like the Googles of this world and all the major automakers at their, development efforts they're going to put into this. Can you invest $1 million? And it's, to be totally frank, the overall venture capital community, even within Silicon Valley, was not exactly super receptive to that kind of thing. It's easy to invest in, easy to understand software technologies. It's very challenging to really wrap your head around the implications of something as complex as this. Of course, equivalently, the rewards are exponentially greater if you successfully deliver on it.
So what you're seeing is basically the raw 3D data in the environment that's being imaged by our LiDAR sensor. So you can see everything going on here in real time. The different colors represent different distances that you can see out in this 120-degree field of view from the LiDAR sensor. This is the eyes of the autonomous car. This is how it can understand what's going on and navigate safely through the environment. And realistically, manual driving being completely obsolete, that's a 2040 problem. What we're solving for is being able to allow it to safely navigate starting on highway scenarios and then expanding the operating domain over time. In addition to being able to enable much safer driving capabilities and active safety systems on the vehicles that are here today.
The physics behind it, how to be able to make all of this work, is really, really hard. And in our case, of course, it always checked out, it always made sense, theoretically. And that's where, after integrating all these different things, after years worth of work, to be able to have the opportunity to see it, to have it come alive, to have it all work, and now to be powering some of the future of the largest companies in the world in this transportation industry, it is incredibly inspiring, to myself, to the team, to everyone, and what drives us every day. The thing that I'm most proud of is being able to show that we've successfully seen this through, that end to end, and showing that you can have this almost like David versus Goliath scenario in so many different dimensions that can all come together, and it really is possible.
I just need to text back Brian Danielson.
You don't need to text me back, I'm right here.
Well, I just did. Let's go.
How are you?
Great.
Let's go.
Hey, okay. So the thing, does it make sense?
What's that?
The thing I was talking about.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Uh-oh.
Oh, no, I'm on. Go.
He's on. He's on. Hi, I'm Tony Khan. I'm the owner, chairman, president, CEO, founder, booker, head of creative, and a few other things for All Elite Wrestling, AEW. I was a TV kid. I watched the A-Team, and Hulk Hogan played himself on the A-Team, so that was pretty cool, but I didn't know that was a real person. I just thought that was a guy on TV at first. And then I watched G.I. Joe, and the host of G.I. Joe was Sergeant Slaughter, but I didn't know he was a wrestler. And then I saw ads for wrestling, and Hulk Hogan and Sergeant Slaughter were part of the WWF, so I thought that was pretty interesting, and then I watched more of it, and that was when I was 8 years old, and I've never looked back in the last 30 years of being a huge fan. I'd always dreamed of starting a wrestling company, but there was actually a very viable business case and reasons to do so in 2018. The media rights for wrestling television had gone very high, and I think they're going to continue to rise because wrestling is so strong in the marketplace right now on TV. When I started working on this in 2018, the contracts we knew were going to fetch hundreds of millions of dollars in guarantees. So it begged the question, would there be space for a competitive wrestling product that could also demand big rights fees on television? I thought so, yes. Instead of having a big touring model and people wrestling hundreds of times a year, to me, the bread and butter was going to be the TV product. So I happened to be friends with Kevin Riley, who at the time was president of TNT and TBS. And he introduced me to the team there. And really, they put us through the ringer, big time, before they signed up for this. And right out of the gate, with no TV contract, as I started to lock up, honestly, millions and millions of dollars in guarantees to sign up wrestlers for multi-year deals. And there was a unique opportunity at the time in the marketplace because there were a lot of great wrestlers who were not under contract. We had to really go out and prove ourselves, and we did. We did really good numbers immediately. And once we proved we could establish ourselves and then continue and maintain those really strong numbers, we received a $175 million contract from TNT. And through the pandemic, that was really what kept us going in a lot of ways. Without the live event revenue coming in, because we were the #1 wrestling touring company in the world in 2019 on a per show basis. We had the highest average number of paid fans per show of anyone. And then in 2020, you go to having no paid fans. And I tried to be the first to bring fans back to the live event experience, but still, at 25% capacity and everyone physically distanced and in the outdoor space and everyone masked. It was great, but also business-wise. I mean, the ratings picked up because I think the shows are more fun with the fans there, and also that live event revenue is great, and we've been doing fantastic with our live tours through the last several months since we came back in July, August, and September. Today in Arthur Ashe Stadium, the AEW Grand Slam, it's a very typical show day in some ways. In other ways, it's been absolutely crazy. Nobody had ever done a wrestling show in Arthur Ashe Stadium, which is this amazing venue and like the most amazing wrestling city in so many ways, this great market with great fans. It's our attendance record, including the suites. We'll have over 20,000 people here, which is a first for AEW. I'm always going through the show, I'm going through ideas, there's all the matches, talking to the people in the matches, making sure the show goes smoothly. A lot of stuff happens on the day of, people come up with new ideas, and if there's a good idea that we can incorporate on the day of, then we're gonna talk and I'll make a late call. So I'm making some audibles, as we'd say in football, at the line of scrimmage as I go here, and it'll be really fun. I want to put a crash pad here. It doesn't need to be here the whole show, but for Rampage, I want something here because I think we should toss Fuego off and have you down and then make you watch it or whatever. That'd be great. On screen, I think we have a lot of conflict, but backstage, it's a great environment. I mean, there's always creative conflict, but for the most part, you know, the vast majority of the time, we have a great working relationship with each other, and I try to start that from the top. I think there's literally over 100 people out here I have really good relationships with, and that starts with personal relationships. And for me, I have a lot of things to do, but I have enough bandwidth to make time. If you're on Dynamite or Rampage, it's a big deal, and I'll be spending time talking to you about what we're gonna do.
Being around Tony Khan is infectious, and he's a wrestling fan. I'm a wrestling fan. That's why I'm here today. Tony Khan has a real passion for pro wrestling. He started AEW for the right reasons and changed wrestling history as a result.
Tony is a prime example. You don't have to be a wrestler to know our business. He was a lifelong fan. He studied it. He studied the business of it and the creative of it. And every idea he's ever presented to me, it's been great.
For one thing, it's incredible how much stuff he actually does and still is able to keep track of everything. How he doesn't have 8 assistants that are all on the different projects that he's doing, I really don't know. He does everything himself. It's really motivating working with him to see him succeeding and thriving in so many areas all at the same time. It just makes you want to work harder.
When we started AEW Dynamite just over 2 years ago in October 2019, it was a tough fight for a couple years. They had never been number 1 on cable until April 14th, 2021. And since April 14th, now we've had several number 1 finishes and a really hot run of them recently. With the launch of AEW Rampage, we had to get bigger and better and make this the best time in the history of AEW, which I think it really has been. In terms of every major business metric, television ratings, pay-per-view, viewership, live events, merchandising, we're at all-time highs in all of these metrics. So it's definitely the most exciting time in the history of our business. It really hasn't been anything like what we're doing in terms of competing head-to-head with WWE week to week in the cable ratings in 2 decades. And this is all now a head-to-head 2-team competition in many ways. So it is the most focused I think the fans have been on a head-to-head competition in a long time, because there haven't been 2 companies that were able to generate hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue since the late 90s.
Sam Bankman-Fried is a 29-year-old American expat who had lived in Hong Kong for the last few years, but actually just recently moved to Bermuda. He's notable for a number of reasons, but I think most critically, he is the richest 20-something in the world and the richest person in all of crypto, with a net worth of $22.5 billion. What's most interesting about the way he raised this money is that unlike a lot of people that got into Bitcoin very early on, he started relatively late. He did not purchase his first Bitcoin until the year 2017, when he found a way to sort of arbitrage differences in the price of Bitcoin between US and Japanese exchanges, sometimes buying it and then selling it at a 30% markup. He did this over and over again until he built a small fortune. And then he used that in conjunction with some venture capital that he raised to launch an exchange called FTX. FTX just set a record for the largest private raise in crypto history. It brought in $900 million at an $18 billion valuation. Sam's inclusion in the billionaires list is really notable because, for one thing, the only person in the world that has ever gotten so rich so quickly is Mark Zuckerberg, who everyone has heard of. And I think that really speaks to the way that he was able to time the market to take advantage of the first mainstream bull run in 2017, where Bitcoin went up from about $2,500 to close to $20,000 in just over 6 months. And then how he was able to roll that into building an exchange that caters to more active traders that trade higher amounts at higher frequencies. And he's really in some ways become a kingmaker in the industry.
I first started looking into crypto not because of anything to do with blockchain technology. It just seemed like a good trading opportunity. That was sort of what my background was. And there are lots of signs that it was a space that had a ton of demand and a ton of excitement and interest and volume, but not very much liquidity. And what that means is there's a pretty significant chance that customers are not getting great prices when they're trading. For that same reason, There's potentially a lot of money to be made providing liquidity to those, being a market maker, doing arbitrage, and trying to sort of increase the efficiency and liquidity of crypto markets globally. That did turn out to be true, but it also quickly became clear that the space was in need of better infrastructure. When you think about the infrastructure in crypto, a lot of it is the exchanges. They combine a lot of different business models together, and it seemed like a really compelling opportunity to try to jump in and build something better.
He's a really interesting subject to report on for a number of reasons. I mean, first of all, his appearance. He's only 29 years old, and he typically wears a t-shirt or a sweatshirt that has the FTX logo on it, khaki shorts, and he has this big kind of poofy hair. It's funny, when we got a quote from Tom Brady for the story, who is an FTX endorser and owns FTX stock, he said the first thing that jumped out to him about Sam when he saw him on TV before they had even met is the fact that he needs a haircut. The second thing that really stood out is his transparency. I mean, he's very open to talking, and the reason I think is because he's raising all this money for a particular reason. He's a believer in a element of philanthropy known as effective altruism, where adherents rely on the use of data and modeling to find objective ways to do the most good possible with their money. There's a few different roles that somebody can play as an effective altruist, and he's chosen to be what's known as an earn to giver, which means he's going to try to earn as much money as he possibly can so that he can give it to people that are involved in actual charities to give the money away and have the most positive impact.
In the end, my goal is to do as much good as I can for the world. Mostly what I think about is, what role should I be playing here? And I think the most impressive people I know, the people who I've the most respect for, and who are maybe doing the most good for the world are the people who are really taking charge of some of these initiatives to combat some of the biggest problems that we're facing as a society. But another way that one can have impact is by helping to fund some of these causes, and that's what I've been doing. So I got into finance in the first place to try and maximize the amount that I can donate to some of the most effective causes. I'd certainly love to be spending more time thinking directly about what these projects can be working on, but right now there are a lot of really impressive people doing that. I wish there were way more. My main role right now is to do what I can to help support them financially or any other way that I can.
The idea of when a philanthropist decides to stop earning and starts giving it away is a question that has plagued billionaires for a very long time. And it's something that's very applicable to effective altruists, especially earn to givers, because their job, or I guess their self-appointed job, is to just make as much money as possible. This would mean that Sam has very little say in where the money goes or how it's spent. He's just going to make as much as possible. And that's a really interesting question, because that's not the same model that other corporate titans have taken. I spoke with a philosopher and a professor at Princeton known as Peter Singer, who is sort of seen as one of the fathers of this effective altruist movement. And he said it's a very individual decision, and it's hard to know what the right thing to do is. He spoke to me about Bill Gates and how Bill decided to step down from running Microsoft to run the Gates Foundation, which is very much a full-time job. And he told me it's really hard to kind of do the counterfactual and wonder, was that the right decision? Obviously, Microsoft is still doing well, but perhaps it would be doing even better if he decided to stay in that role and not turn it over to Steve Ballmer. This is the dilemma that Sam's going to be coming back to time and time again, especially if and when his wealth grows and becomes more liquid. He actually told us right now that he has only about $200,000 in the bank account. And in the story, we wrote that one way that Sam is very much like a 29-year-old is that he's remarkably cash poor. But assuming that his business ventures go as planned, at some point he's going to have to wonder if it makes sense for him to give away the money, or if he's happy to keep trying to earn as much as possible and give it to trusted third parties and partners to give it away.
You don't have an option to be scrappy or innovative. You have to, otherwise you don't have a chance to be successful. My name is Ronak Nirmal. I'm the CEO of AccuCo. I'm 29 years old. So at AccuCo, we work with third-party e-commerce sellers. Most of these guys are mom and pop shops. And what we do is we go out and acquire their brands, allow them to participate in the growth of their brand alongside us, and let them have an opportunity to exit. I'm a first-generation Sikh American. I immigrated with my family from India at the age of 7. What was really interesting is that my parents didn't want to take any money from their parents. They wanted to come here and truly, build their own future. And I wanted to follow in their footsteps and do the same. So at the age of 14, I started my first online company. I was able to actually generate enough money to pay for my college tuition as well as my apartment in college as well. My first job out of college was actually at Amazon. I started out as a business analyst. But what was really interesting was what I was really able to achieve there. My boss told me, why don't you go out and start a brand on Amazon, see how well that does, learn the difficult points that sellers have with e-commerce and the tools that we can help build to empower sellers to be successful on our platform. I did so over the next 6 months, after which I actually left Amazon to pursue selling on Amazon full time, because that brand that I'd started, we sold over $7 million in our first year. So really have been, in this space for 7 years, have been living and breathing Amazon. And rather than going out and building our brands from the ground up or consulting for some of the largest sellers, why not take all that knowledge and expertise and then go out and buy some of the best brands that exist and help grow those to the next level? You have to work hard for everything and earn it yourself, whether that's building something from the ground up or working with and getting the most talented people that you can to work with you to build something. Things aren't going to get handed down to you. You have to be the one that does it, and just, focusing on that has allowed me to succeed.
I'm Song Laron, from New York originally, grew up in LA also, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Squire.
I'm Dave Salvon. I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and Rockland County, New York. I'm the co-founder and president of Squire.
You can think of us as like the operating system for the barbershop. So we handle everything from the booking to the payment, to the point of sale system, to payroll, marketing, everything in between. It's really meant to be a full one-stop shop that does everything that barbershops need to operate their business.
It actually started out from our own problems. Back a couple of years ago, it was a really terrible experience to get a haircut. You had to call or text your barber. You had to sit in the barbershop and wait. You had to bring cash. All that can be solved by technology. And a couple of years ago, ride sharing was all the rage, and you could book restaurants from your phone. So why couldn't you book an appointment? And it was our problem. But once we really pull back the sheets on everything, we realized the big problem was on the owner-operator side. They were using several different pieces of software to solve something that we thought one software could do. And that's kind of what we, did and developed Squire to solve all the needs of the barbershop in one particular system.
So we were actually friends before starting Squire. We were both in New York, professionals. I was in corporate law, and Dave was in finance and in business school. And we used to just hang out. Dave used to throw these great house parties in Harlem. We had a lot of mutual friends.
And then we decided we needed a better use of our time. Besides going out and having fun, why don't we develop something that can last a generation?
So we would just brainstorm ideas on the weekend. We both lived in Harlem, uptown in Manhattan, so we would go to Columbia campus and actually just sneak into some of the buildings and just whiteboard ideas. Eventually, that's when we came up with the idea for Squire. And like Dave said, it was rooted in solving our own problems, something we both experienced. I started going to the barbershop around 6 or 7 as a kid with my dad, and this was 20 years later. and the process really hadn't changed. And that's something that we both realized. And more importantly, we realized that no tech companies in Silicon Valley were like addressing this space. It was totally overlooked and underserved. And then we thought, you know what, there could be something big here.
You know, it was very difficult to raise capital in the early days. The ugly truth is, we were targeting barbershops as 2 African-American guys. They, really, a lot of investors thought or jumped to the conclusion that we're only targeting African-American barbershops. But our understanding is everybody gets a haircut. We had to show traction. We had to show that, we were targeting a broad audience, and we had to show momentum. We started a company in 2015 and didn't raise our first institutional capital to 2019. So, we were just grinding, laying tracks, riding over them, to get to a point where we had validation in the market.
So our first product was a mobile app. And, it took us a lot to get it built. We're not technical founders, either one of us, so we had to find somebody to build it. And eventually we got that product out to market. We were super excited. We thought it was great. We loved to use it, but pretty quickly we found that the market, our customers, barbershops and barbers weren't really responding well to it. They weren't adopting it in the way that we thought they would. And that was kind of a slap in the face or a really watershed moment for us, because we realized is although it was solving our problems, we weren't focused enough on our customers. And after all those months of hard work, we had to kind of go back to the drawing board and say, how can we really build something that fundamentally helps and drives value to the people we're servicing, which is the barbershop owners and the barbers. So with that, we kind of pivoted and built a new product that was much more focused on the shop operations and really handling all the back office, and most importantly, the point of sale in the store, and having everything fully integrated. And that was the product that eventually really caught on, and the market responded really well to, and it's evolved into what we have today.
We thought that, we get every barbershop in the world in 2 years, and, we were doing $10 billion in revenue, and we were public. But I think, that was like youthful optimism, It's beyond our wildest dreams, creating a company with $1 billion in value, from where we come from, from our backgrounds. I think, I was the wealthiest person in my family before I started this, and I wasn't making that much money. So now, to build something of immense value, it's just, a different feeling. And sometimes I don't realize it until other people say it. I'm just like, we're in it, and, we're in the grind every day. And other people say, oh, okay, yeah, it's something serious. Because, we haven't really changed since we started. We're the same people. We have a little more resources, but you hear from outside sources and you just stop and say, wow, we built something.
Yeah, I think that the approach we've taken and the features that we've launched and provided have really been kind of like the not only best in class, but like first in class a lot of times. Like, we're doing things that other companies addressing barbershops or similar industries like have never done. Adding this financial layer, adding the financial services, and we provide supplies for the barbershop with our product Squire Supply, where they can actually order their razors and neck strips and everything right through our system. We're going so deep into the vertical that it allows us to unlock value and provide more value than, frankly, I think any other company does.
We want Squire to be eventually, they don't have to touch any other system at all. They have to just turn on the lights, we'll cut here, and Squire's gonna do the rest. And we're marching towards that. And I think we've done a great job so far.
Both of my parents are immigrants from Mexico, and the immigrant experience for me is parallel to what education should be about, right? Which is, if you have a set of opportunities available to you, there should be as few barriers as possible to allow you to progress in society. My name's Felix Verano, 26 years old, co-founder and CEO of a company called Emil Learning. Best way to understand what Emil Learning does is we're building the Netflix of high school education. The vision is that a student anywhere in the world should be able to access any imaginable course, anytime, anywhere. We have the technology in 2021 to make that happen. Education hasn't changed in a long time, and the effects of this outdated system really became obvious or evident during the pandemic. Where we fit in is saying, how can we fix some of these issues in education around accessibility and making the best courses available to everyone, regardless of what local resources are available to them. I've been obsessed with education for a really long time. I went through public school in LA, massive system, really messy, really complex. A lot of people have been have gone through that system. In my case, sort of had a front row seat to it, right? And that's inspired a lot of our sort of ambition for the scale that we're shooting for. Ultimately, I think, education is so important for society because it's one of these areas of society where if one sort of segment of the population is more educated, everyone wins, right? And if we have, all these courses and the ability for somebody to progress in a very tangible way, that should be accessible to everyone. So, 5 years from now, we hope to be in as many households as possible in a way that lets any student in the world progress at their own pace.
Around the world, 300,000 women and more than 1 million newborns lose their lives every year from complications of pregnancy and childbirth, often in health facilities that don't have electricity. Turns out that 59% of health facilities in low and middle income countries are without reliable electricity or have no electricity whatsoever. So midwives and doctors struggle to save lives in near darkness. And We Care Solar is bringing solar electricity to health facilities in need to help health workers have the power to save lives and women and children to have safe childbirth. Yeah, I've had a number of different chapters in my life. I originally thought I was going to be a concert pianist and dancer in college, and then I had a medical condition that required me to have surgery, and that got me very interested in women's health care. So I became a pre-med student and ended up becoming a doctor. So for years, I was an obstetrician gynecologist, and I loved my job. I loved delivering babies. And then when I was about 40, I had a devastating setback. I had a back injury that literally put an end to my clinical career. I had to stop delivering babies, stop doing surgeries, and for about a year, get physical rehabilitation so that I could even sit up for extended periods of time. After a year, I was told I wouldn't be able to be a clinician anymore. So I turned my attention to public health. I went to graduate school in public health, first getting my master's in maternal child health and then entering a PhD program. And while I was there, I was invited to join a research project in northern Nigeria that was studying why so many women die in childbirth. At that time, about 500,000 women died every single year from complications of pregnancy and childbirth, which was so different than my own experience as an obstetrician, where I saw pregnancy and childbirth as a really joyous event. So I joined this research project in northern Nigeria where I did medical anthropology. I basically sat myself in a hospital watching doctors and nurses as they conducted care to try and understand some of the factors contributing to these terrible loss of life. So I started writing home to people about the conditions that I was seeing, particularly to my husband, Hal Aronson, who's a solar engineer, and he said, look, when you get back, maybe we can come up with a solution. And so when I returned to the States, he developed a solar electric system for the hospital, and over the next year, the maternal deaths dropped by 70%. The solar suitcase is a compact, rugged solar electric system that was designed specifically for maternal health care. It includes medical surgical lights, rechargeable headlamps, medical devices such as a fetal heart rate monitor and an infrared thermometer, as well as 12-volt DC charging for phones and other devices. And we deliver these to remote health centers that may have no electricity or unreliable electricity. And with the solar suitcase, midwives and doctors are able to provide immediate and appropriate medical care. So it enables health workers to have bright light and emergency communications so that no matter where they are, they can provide immediate and appropriate medical care for women in need. What was once viewed as the most devastating setback to my career ended up opening the door to probably even a more exciting career in some ways. And, I loved actually delivering babies. I loved working with patients one-on-one, but now I know I'm touching literally millions of lives through the work of my team and through our organization. And, you know, even though I hadn't ever imagined that I'd have a career like this, I think particularly after 50, it's really wonderful to say, how can I touch the world? There's so many problems in the world that need all sorts of skills and resources in order to solve them. And so in a way, I feel like many different parts of my life brought me to this moment that I'm able to step up and really rise to the challenge of trying to solve a global problem.
For decades and decades, the United States had plenty of natural gas supplies, domestic gas that was drilled from fields in Texas and Oklahoma and all over the country, really. In the late 90s, the drillers started having trouble replacing the fields that they had been producing from. They found it was getting harder and harder to maintain our domestic supplies of natural gas. I first heard about Michael Smith in the early 2000s when entrepreneurs like himself were starting to think, oh man, if we can't get enough natural gas in the United States domestically, we're going to have to get it from somewhere else. Very few people who were considering this. If we can't get domestic gas, we're going to have to import it from the rest of the world. And it's hard to import gas. The trouble with moving gas is that it's gaseous. How do you move gas? You put it in a pipeline usually, but you can't have a pipeline that goes from the Middle East all the way to the US. You have to condense the gas. So what they do to turn natural gas into liquefied natural gas is they build these enormous factories that basically chill it down. Think of a refrigerator that is so cold that it will take the air around you and condense it 600 times. And when you shrink it and condense it, it turns into a liquid, and then you can pump that liquid into basically a thermos. And in this case, these thermoses are the size of gigantic ships, huge tankers that are insulated, and they can keep the gas in its liquid state as it's floating around the world. So what Michael Smith thought was, I've found some really great locations on the Texas Gulf Coast where we could import this LNG from other parts of the world. We're going to import the gas and then regasify it, turn it from a liquid back into a gas, and then just put it into the US pipeline network so that it can replace the domestic gas.
LNG is the cleanest fossil fuel, and we're taking US LNG and exporting it to countries that do not have enough energy and would otherwise be burning dirty coal or bunker fuel, which is also very bad for the environment. So the quicker we can be all on natural gas until the day comes that we're on renewables, the better it is for the environment, global warming.
He raised about $800 million, mostly from ConocoPhillips, to build this regasification terminal. The problem was that as they were building this terminal, something happened in the United States, and that was the fracking revolution. It's short for hydraulic fracturing. That's where drillers will go down 2 miles into the earth. They'll drill sideways into a very thin layer of shale that is laden with oil or natural gas. No one knew that all of a sudden, over the past 10 or 15 years, that drillers would discover this method of unlocking trillions upon trillions of cubic feet worth of domestic gas that we never knew was there. And a lot of people don't like fracking. They're worried about the effect that fracking could have on groundwater supplies. But the reality of the situation is that fracking has allowed us to unlock so much natural gas that we can displace the coal that we've used to, in the past, provide almost half of America's electrical power. Michael Smith was building this project to import gas at the same time that America's frackers were unlocking more gas than we ever knew existed in the United States. By the time it was completed in 2008, they had a shiny new import terminal, and then they looked around and said, oh no, this is completely obsolete. There was no demand for importing gas like they thought there would be. They decided that what they would do was be one of the first to export liquefied natural gas from the United States to the rest of the world. But it wasn't that easy. He raised $800 million to build the import terminal. In order to build the export terminal, he would need to raise $13 billion. There are very few construction projects in the United States that have ever cost more than Freeport LNG. This is something, no one had raised this much money before for a project, especially not one that was really led and controlled by a single individual. It's so impressive that they've built this thing. It's bigger than any factory, any refinery you've ever seen. And over the last year, Freeport LNG has exported roughly 200 cargoes of U.S. gas in the form of LNG. This is just it's a tremendous development. They found so much gas that now we can send it around to the rest of the world and help other countries not have to use coal as well.
There is still 1 billion people in the world without electricity, and they want a piece of the pie that we take for granted.
Michael Smith owns roughly 60% of this all. He was able to hold on to control of the majority of the equity in this operation. Forbes estimates right now that Michael Smith is worth roughly $1 billion. The beauty of his business at Freeport LNG is that you don't just build this export facility and not have customers. What they did while they were lining up the financing, they convinced these buyers in South Korea and Japan and China to enter into 20-year contracts. He knows how much money Freeport LNG is going to make pretty much every year for the next 2 decades. So we have him at about a net worth of $1 billion right now, but this business will be generating so much cash over the next few years that they'll be able to pay off their roughly $11 billion worth of debt that they're carrying. And after that, it's all gravy. Assuming it all goes right. There's still some risk there. There could be a hurricane that blows through. The United States gets roughly 20% of our electricity by combusting natural gas in power plants. Because of all this gas that we've discovered, the United States has been able to reduce our carbon emissions tremendously over the last 10 or 15 years. So as coal goes down, the use of gas is going up. And that's the case around the entire world. Thanks to the gas that we're exporting in the form of LNG. Much of the LNG that flows out of the Freeport project goes to places like Japan and South Korea and China. And one cargo of this LNG can provide enough gas to make the electricity that can power thousands and thousands of homes for months at a time. If we're concerned about carbon emissions, people see natural gas as kind of a bridge that is taking us from the old times of coal to a future where we can hopefully rely mostly on renewables like solar and wind and other options. So gas is that very important bridge fuel that will get us to where we need to go.
I'm Tracy Chadwell. I'm the founding partner of 1843 Capital. 1843 Capital is an early stage venture capital fund that invests in technology companies. Originally, I went to law school and I became a lawyer. I had a dad who was a lawyer, and he said, Tracy, the only sure things are death and taxes. He was an estate planning attorney. and so he said, you definitely should go to law school and you'll have work for life. And so I did, and I loved working in law, but there was always something missing. And so I decided to go back and take some business courses and started to work on the financial side of things with a merchant banking firm that I worked for in Chicago. My life has been really interesting, and I feel very lucky because I have a lot of different parts that have come together to create one whole. So I've started from being an attorney, then working in financial services and being an investment banker at Robertson Stephens, and then moving to become a partner of a $1 billion growth capital fund, one of the first women partners. I've also taken some time off. I've been out in the field and been a mother for a little bit. So then when I came back to starting my own firm, I used all of those pieces to create what is now 1843 Capital. When I was 52 years old, I decided I think it's the right time for something like this. You know, when I was at Baker Capital, I never saw any other women investors. I never saw any women founders of companies. And all of a sudden, we had this perfect storm of women being interested in building businesses and capital there to support them, accelerators that were there to support them, and no capital. So I said, you know what, I think I'm going to start, first of all, by investing in women because they're not getting enough venture capital dollars. So they were getting 2.7% at the time, and really the number has not moved, unfortunately. But in finance, we always look for inefficient markets. And I thought, wow, what a perfect inefficient market. So that's how I started. And I've developed a terrific track record, and then I turned that into starting my own fund. My message to women that are 20 and 30 years old, and because I do a lot of investing in longevity and technology for the aging, is you're gonna live to be 150 years old. So enjoy yourself, relax. I think what has led to my success is I follow the breadcrumbs. And I'm quiet and I listen. I spend a lot of time meditating. And if you follow the breadcrumbs, you won't get distracted off onto a path that wasn't meant for you, because I really truly believe that every person has a role in this world and we all have a purpose. And if you're quiet, you can listen and find that purpose. But if you're distracted and you're running around and you're letting yourself focus on things that are important, when people say to me, what is it, you know, Tracy, how do I find my purpose? How do I know what I'm meant to do? First, ask yourself the question, why are you pursuing what you're pursuing? Are you pursuing something because of fame? Are you pursuing something because of money? Are you pursuing something because of, either internal or external expectations that are put on you? What you need to do is just be very quiet and listen, and then opportunities will start to present themselves. And when it feels right, that's the universe pushing you in the right way. If you're having a tremendous amount of frustration, you're either really learning an important lesson or you're being moved in a different direction, which is absolutely terrific. So take time, you look around you, be mindful, and things will unfold.
As a woman in my seat and as a CEO, I feel the responsibility to be an example of what a more integrated masculine and feminine leadership team and company looks like. Setback, we're trying to help companies reimagine the way that they introduce their employees to their roles. So instead of the age-old learning management system where you go take a course, or instead of boot camps where it's easy for employees to forget, we take all of your company knowledge and training and surface it exactly where the employee needs every step of the way. So it creates a much more self-sufficient learning experience. I think I'm the person to tackle this problem because I felt it firsthand. My dream wasn't to become an entrepreneur initially, but I worked in startups and I worked in companies that were hiring lots and lots of employees and launching new business lines and constantly changing. And we really struggled with helping keep all of our employees on the same page and ensuring that they knew all of our different tools and processes and systems. And what I found is that while in our personal lives, everything was instantly accessible on our smartphones and personalized to us and recommended to us, in the workplace, you had to go digging for information. And that's really how I started coming up with the idea for Setback. I was like, well, what if where are the employees actually working and spending their time, that information that they needed to know how to do their job or how to do that workflow was instantly accessible to them. Challenge that I feel more now in my role as CEO than I ever did as an employee is really the pressure, and probably it's pressure that I'm putting on myself to do it different. There's very, very few women in our space, and growing up, I think one of the reasons I didn't aspire to be an entrepreneur is I didn't have the visual of what that looked like. If anything, I think the visual of what a successful woman looked like in movies was actually something that made women shy away from wanting to be that strong, empowered female leader. And so I really see this opportunity with Setback as an opportunity to really show what the next wave of female leadership looks like.
In Korea, after college, I worked there 2.5 years in light bulb company, one of the biggest in Korea. We shipped out lots of merchandise to especially New York metropolitan area. Obviously, 2-3 years later, we have a kind of trouble, quality problem, communication problem. There's no telegram, no text, no nothing those days. So company decided somebody we need to coordinate to stay in USA. So I spent almost 3 years with a Korean company, but it's a hard time with getting money. Korea has no money, so I got money from our importer buyer. Meantime, I opened my eye. Oh my God, this is B. Altman, this is Lord and Taylor, this is like a USA. Then I decided I can make the dream, something I can make. Then I decided 1971, my own company, which is Bulbrite, was founded.
I often think about what would it be like if I moved to a new country now, where I didn't speak the language, where I couldn't eat the food, like literally couldn't eat the food, and there was no phone, there was no way to communicate with everyone, and I just had to start a new company by myself with my husband in a country that I didn't know. I can't honestly fathom that. I went to college, and then after college, I worked at Pricewaterhouse. I went to school at night to get my MBA. And after that, I went to work for what I thought at the time was my dream job. I was working in Hollywood, working for a producer, but on the business side of things. And the business was moving back to New York. And at the time, the company was about to turn 30. My dad was turning 60, I was turning 30. And he kind of sat me down, having not said anything until that point about we'd really like you to work in the family business.
It's not the space, it's not the merchandise. We need the manpower, and honest, I beg of Kathy, can you help me?
And so it was very subtle, not so subtle. And at that time, I was at a inflection point in my life, turning 30. And I said, you know what, it's kind of now or never. And I would hate for the business to be sold or just not having given it a shot.
She made the final decision. So I say, hallelujah.
He started me in customer service. And I said, why am I starting in customer service? I have my MBA, I can run the financial department, I can do whatever you need me to do. And he said, you have to start with the customers.
The way of business is mechanically, technically, completely earth and sky, like big difference now. But its concept is the same thing. When you work hard, when you good relationship with the customer, that's most important.
I think he thought, okay, she's starting at 30. I'll consider letting her have some more responsibility a decade from now. So at 40, when the business was 40 and he was 70, 2 years earlier than he expected, he did hand over the presidency, and then he became chairman, and then I've been running it since then. I remember sitting with my customer service manager at the time, and she came to my office with a problem. And she said, oh, we have this problem with this customer, what should we do? And I literally leaned in and I said, I have no idea, I just became president yesterday and you've been here for 20 years. What do you think you should do, we should do? And she said, I have no idea. Andrew used to make all the decisions. And I went, wow, this is what the change of leadership is gonna look like. So I made a very deliberate intent in building a team that was A, smarter than me, and B, empower them to make the decisions. I think that's probably the biggest difference, is the leadership style is different. And it was the appropriate leadership style for that time in the business. And I think this is the right time to, we've grown so much. So if I had to make every micro decision, it would not be fun, A, for me, nor would it be fun for my team.
Once you small thing, small dream, you can succeed 110%. Then you got encouragement. Then I figured out this is country. It's really, if you work hard, and you can succeed.
What do I think the American dream is? I agree with him that for me, America stands for the possibilities, right? I think hard work is important, but I think that's only one element of the American dream. I think there's other parts though, and I think part of it is not only what you did for your own family and the families of the people that worked at the company throughout the 50 years, but also what you give back. 9/11 happened right before I joined the company. And I remember thinking to myself, why am I doing this other than it's my family business? And one of the industry leaders at that time, I remember, I have the ad up on my wall, said, America needs light, beautiful light, and we're responsible for providing it. And to this day, like that is the thing, that's my guiding light. I look at that and go, I now as the leader of this organization that physically makes light, I'm responsible for providing beautiful light, however that manifests itself in this amazing country.
Abceller is a technology company that is reinventing the workflows that allow for the generation of therapeutic antibodies. So basically, we search, decode, and analyze natural immune systems to find molecules that have the properties that make them suitable to be developed as drugs. Abceller basically is focused on integrating modern technologies that allow you to search through natural immune systems with much higher throughput, much more information content, so that on the first pass, you can find something that looks very close to a therapeutic and thereby speed up the path from an idea to a clinical product. Most prominent recently was our work on COVID-19. What is particularly special about that one was the urgency and the speed with which it was done. So we had an opportunity, based on a technology advantage in the field, to step up and to start from a single blood sample and screen through that to find a therapeutic antibody that became bamlanivimab that went into clinical testing within 3 months. So the opportunity to work with another company, Eli Lilly, to break records in the speed of drug development and create a therapy that got emergency use authorization and has already helped hundreds of thousands of people in the US and around the world. So I started my career as an academic, both teaching but also running a research group. One of the biggest transitions and the biggest challenges to moving that into a company that's scaling as quickly as Abceller is learning to find the people that you can put in charge of giant swaths of the business, and to have faith in them to do that and to do it without you interfering in it, to give enough room to empower leaders across the company. And you learn very quickly that if you don't do that, it doesn't scale and you'll drive yourself crazy. Abceller is focused on completing the vision that we set out to do now almost 10 years ago. And that is to assemble and build up technologies. And technologies defined not just as instruments and devices and IP, but also the people, the workflows, the facilities that can serve as a drug discovery engine for the industry. So today, what that looks like is hiring people, building technologies, looking to find opportunities to bring in technologies from the outside, and then integrating that into a machine that can do drug discovery faster and succeed where others have failed in the past.
I think that it's so easy to fall into a job just for the paycheck, but for us, we look for kindness, as well as the desire to really create an impact on society. I'm Trisha Van Teague. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Queenly, and I'm 27 years old. So we built Queenly, and it's an online marketplace dedicated towards the whole formal wear industry. And so we enable women to be able to buy and sell dresses from one another, as well as for small businesses that carry bridal dresses or quinceañera dresses to come on board online. I've been in the pageant industry for about 8 years now, and towards the end, I just have been seeing the same exact problem. Not every girl comes from an affluent family where you can afford a $700 dress like off the rack. So that's when I really thought about starting Queenly. Fundraising was very hard. I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it, and especially 1, we're female founders, 2, we're underrepresented like minority founders, 3, we're selling dresses. Every single meeting we walked into, whether it's in person or Zoom, we had to make sure we brought our A++ game. My co-founder went to Penn, I went to Berkeley. Like, these are great schools. We worked at Uber, Facebook, and Pinterest, great companies. Still isn't enough when we bring up, hey, we used to do pageants. Hey, we're tackling the dress industry. And so I think that we just have to work twice, 3 times as hard as male founders in this industry. I think the wonderful thing about our company and my co-founder and I and our team is that we're not just doing this for fun or because we want to look cool as startup founders. We really care about our users. We care about changing this industry. Keeping that in our hearts that this is the goal we want to solve, is we want to empower all women to be able to find their dream dress and to look and feel like a queen. That really grounds all of us.
The benefit and actually the beauty of having a public failure, at least for me, it took away any fear of failure. Because you fast forward 10 years later and I'm stronger as a person. I've already failed publicly. I lived through it. It was horrible at the time. And all that did was just allow me to move forward at a very fast pace and create an amazing company. The RealReal is the world's largest marketplace for authenticated luxury resale. When I was growing up, both of my parents, mostly because they're artists, really loved beautiful things. And that didn't necessarily mean beautiful new things. So my mother would go to people's homes, and if they had a nice rug, she'd say, when you're ready to sell it, I'll buy it from you. And my father and I would go to the junkyard to scavenger for beautiful pieces, which he would then refurbish and turn into something else. At the moment in time when I shut the company down to return money to shareholders, I was thinking about my employees and making sure they had a pay package and future jobs. And also, my husband had asked me for a divorce that day. So there was a lot going on. And I would say 6 months later, it really hit me that this was really bad for my career. It didn't help that every major newspaper and every tech article was written not about the company and not about the Times, but also about me personally, and pretty horrible things. I was called the dumbest person in Silicon Valley, and so it was a hard time. After Pets, even though it had a lot of negative press, I didn't really realize how much of it would sort of stick to me, and how my options may be limited after that, until I met with a recruiter. And he said, basically, he said, well, Pets.com was such a blow up, your career's over. And, I wouldn't show you to any company, I wouldn't introduce you to any companies. But hearing that made me go, okay, well, what am I gonna do about it? And clearly, I'm not gonna be able to get my dream job from someone else, and I'm gonna have to create my own. That's exactly how that hit me. Not like, oh, he's wrong or he's a jerk. It was like, okay, I'm taking this as valid. What does that mean for me? It means that I should start my own company because other people don't believe in me right now. In the Valley, it's a small world, but I believe in myself, so that's my best option. With the RealReal, our biggest accomplishment is bringing awareness to the amount of fashion in landfill and the incredible benefits of buying and consigning previously owned goods. We're doing it on everything we do on our website. We're doing it on our own company. We're now carbon neutral. And even more importantly, we're working with our congressmen and multiple people in the government to help change laws, to actually increase the awareness of the importance of recirculating used goods and conscious consumption. And if we make any dent on that, given the environmental situation the world's in, I'm gonna feel pretty good about what I've done and what the company's done. I would say that you need to think of your career as a long-term investment. I would encourage you to take risks, never stop taking risks, and even when you think you're there, you're not there yet. that learning happens at every age, and you will have setbacks. You know, figure it out. Don't give up. This is the long game. Don't play the short game. And more importantly, you have to love what you do. And you also have to be conscious of the choices you're making. So if you become an entrepreneur, and I'd love to see more female entrepreneurs, recognize that that will consume your life. So be conscious about it. Is that really the track I want to go, or do I want to balance my home life with job for a while and then I can do it later? The other thing is, you know, really, the RealReal I started at 53, so clearly it's never too late. But I had a lot of great experience to build on. So, you know, life can be long. And also take care of your body and your mind. And, you know, you have to eat right, you have to exercise, you have to give yourself a spiritual nourishment. So take care of yourself along the way.
I think what a lot of people don't know about Panda is that we're a family business. And I think the unique role that Panda plays is that we were the first taste of Chinese food for many in the US. What I say about Panda is we are the largest mom and pop Chinese restaurant in the world. And our cause has everything to do with being American Chinese and everything to do with creating opportunities for people.
Well, I was born in China, and I grew up in Taiwan and spent about 4.5 years in Japan before I came to United States.
I was born in Burma, raised in Hong Kong, and came over here for college education. My husband, after graduate, he came over to California to open a restaurant with his father.
So Panda Inn was built in 1973. When we first started the restaurant business, I thought it would be a lot easier to make money. Oh no, it wasn't like that. The first month, we did like $12,000. That was like $400 a day. You know, I used to make a couple $100 just as a waiter.
My father was front of the house and greeting guests. My grandfather was back of the house and he was making food for the guests. My mom, who was already an electrical engineer, would come and be a hostess on the weekend. And there was my grandmother and my uncles and my aunties, and they'd all come together to really support this family business. So in terms of growing up as part of this Panda business, what I knew about business was that business was going to be about family.
Because of Panda Inn, we got invited by the developer of Glendale Galleria to go and open a restaurant in the mall. And that is when I really started to look at the possibilities.
Because mall is actually a new thing at that moment in time. We do our very best how to provide the food that we have. We really have to focus on great food, great service, and great ambience.
I took what we served from Panda Inn and simplified it and made it work at the Panda Express. I remember when we started, we had the longest line, I would say longer than most other restaurants. I find it, oh wow, this is quite good. And it was easier to do. And I went all over the place to open restaurants.
My parents have done this incredible job. They came to the US with nothing and they were able to build a business that's now a household name. But when it comes to the second generation, what does that mean? What does it mean to honor the legacy, the foundation that they've built, but also what does stewardship look like for the second generation? Many of us that embody this duality and ethnic identity, when we were growing up, maybe it was being a little apologetic for the ethnic sides of our identity. And we at Panda are saying, hey, no, we are unapologetically American Chinese, so that the next generation coming up can say, not only are they not apologetic and unapologetically American Chinese, but they are celebrating their ethnic identity. I think what's really important to recognize is that anti-Asian hate isn't new. Because of appearance, because of fear, Asian Americans, AAPIs, may be labeled as forever foreigners. And then it begs the question, well, if systemic racism exists, what is the role that we can play? What can Panda do? And that's where we launched the Panda Community Fund. And it is a 5-year commitment of $10 million and likely to continue. But really what it is looking into our communities, identifying those local and those national programs, the people that are already doing fantastic work to help the victims of racism and violence, to help those that are already amplifying and educating people about the beauty and diversity of the US and supporting them in their work.
American dream is really defined by individual differently. And for me, it's actually that you're content with what you have, and also able to make a good citizen in the community. I think being the beneficial of United States and being educated here, people in the Chinese community or maybe Asian community, we all know that we have to give them back.
As a second generation, as we look to the third generation, I think what it means is if we're moving from survival and stability to a level of stewardship and celebration, the American dream means how can we have the freedom to honor the past and honor origin, but also have the freedom for original expression.
Only in America, you get to do this. And also, I think I'm very proud that we did it right. We work with our people, we took good care of our people. We make sure that in our ability that they grew. Our job really is to continue to figure out ways that our people can prosper. How do we pay them more? How do we make the work easier and more functional? And how do we get people to come back frequently over and over again? So do every little thing, do them exceptionally well. It really is about modeling. We don't manage people, we lead them. We lead them by setting an example. This is how you could do like I have done. When our people grow, our business grow.
I don't think I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I was inspired on a trip to Japan. I was fascinated by the kimono and also, just the general Japanese aesthetic. So I started to imagine this kind of idea around simple clothing. I felt a little jealous of men who could just easily, get dressed and, if they wanted to look professional, they had a kind of a uniform. I wanted to do something that was simple and that was timeless. I loved textiles, I loved fabric. And so I started seeing these pictures and I imagined these simple clothes and how they worked, and pictures just kept coming to me. And I just started talking up the idea to friends, and I found myself at the boutique show, and I remember floating through and going like, oh, I could do this. When I decided to start the business, I remember thinking, you're crazy, you don't have any money, you can't afford to do this. And I remember looking at my bank account and going like, $350, that's it, that's all you have. What are you doing, But that's what it cost me to sign up for the first boutique show. I just took one little wall in the back of the boutique show, and I shared a booth with 2 other people. And that's sort of how I launched. I think that being over 50, the way I find myself describing it is I feel like I'm like on a spiral, and I keep kind of repeating the same mistakes, but I'm just coming a little higher. I'm like, so I see them, I have a little more perspective, I see them from a little higher place, so I can fix them quicker, or I can be a little more aware of what's happening or what might work or what might not work. I can catch certain things because I have a little different perspective. I think that's personal too. In my own life, I see myself, oh, God, that's the same thing I did before. Okay, this time I caught it a little quicker. This time I spoke up sooner. This time, I actually made a change. I never thought about giving up. I thought it might give me up. You know, it might fail. There were several times along the way, including during COVID, that I thought we might not do this, we might not make it. So that was disturbing, devastating, and also I'm a problem solver, you know, so like when things go wrong, I like dive in. It's kind of like with sustainability, it's like, okay, here's a problem, let's try to fix it, you know. And even though, you know, that's a kind of a strange attitude in life, try to fix problems, but I kind of see problems as opportunities or possibilities, or, you know, something's wrong, piles of clothes that are piling up from our recycle program. What are we gonna do? Oh, there must be a creative solution somewhere. You know, life is long, and like I said, you know, it's just, you know, it kind of keep going. We have so many opportunities when it comes to work, you know, to invent and reinvent ourselves and to do amazing things at all ages.
Luxury fashion is fickle even in the best of times, but the pandemic has taken a huge toll on the industry.
This year I had two focuses in terms of industries. I looked at fashion and I looked at defense, and I feel like those two industries had different reactions to COVID. In so many ways, we've seen a lot of net worths and a lot of companies be impacted by it, seeing fashion in certain cases struggle more than other industries was very interesting. If you had $1 billion business last year in fashion, you're just not going to have that this year. At the beginning of the lockdowns in the United States, Tory Burch was a little bit in the news in the way that she was in touch with the Trump administration to get some relief for the retail industry.
A lot of people saying that why do we need to help fashion as a light industry? I can tell you it is an industry that is supporting America. When you're looking at Gap being the #1 apparel purveyor to Americans, that's supporting America. When you look at the number of employees that we are employing, that is not a light industry. It is not frivolous. It is incredibly important to our economy, and it cannot be left behind.
So I read that story and I thought, okay, this is very interesting, but I want to know what's happening with the business. And then I reached out and I said, hey, I would love to chat with you about what's going on. How is the business doing? And then how is Tory Burch doing as a designer and as an entrepreneur who's leading this business? And I think what became clear with the story also was that you have to be very agile and you have to be able to pivot at a very tough time. And, you know, that has emotional implications and that also has a lot of business implications. So our conversations in the past month or so have been about keeping something you love so much alive at a time when staying alive is harder than any other time.
The fashion industry relies on global systems of manufacturing. A disruption like COVID-19 can be disastrous for every supplier involved.
You have a cardigan and the button comes from Italy. And then because of COVID, Italy's shut down. So you don't have a button. What happens to that cardigan? You either turn that cardigan into something else if you can, or if you can't, then you just scrap it and you have to design something new. And I think the fact that she was able to do that, she was able to design, and they were able to make certain business decisions was very fascinating to me. I know that they moved production from Asia to Brazil because South America shut down later.
But it wasn't just manufacturing that took a hit. The retail arm of Tory Burch faced a dire situation as well.
At one point, almost all of her stores were shut down. Maybe they were not all shut down at the same time, but at one point she had to shut down almost all of them. They were thinking about opening 20 stores just in China. And, you know, plans are changing.
They've had to improvise, shifting focus from physical stores to e-commerce infrastructure and online campaigns, beginning in China, the Middle East, and Japan. Tory Burch started selling items on Tamal, Alibaba's retail site, and optimized all sites for mobile while incorporating artificial intelligence to generate personalized product recommendations. Burch also introduced virtual styling, which enables customers to make private video appointments to see different items in the store. According to a McKinsey report, industry-wide sales profits declined 93% in 2020 as consumers continued to stay home and wear comfortable, casual clothing.
there's definitely been a move towards casual wear. The thing that Tory Burch herself is focused on is they have Tory Sport, which is their casual wear arm, and they have been given more exposure to their loungewear collection. But at the same time, she's saying people will always want to dress up. And she's still focused mostly on that. And what she and her husband are specifically focusing on is having iconic pieces. And I was talking to an analyst at McKinsey who told me, the brands that are in luxury that are going to survive the COVID storm are the ones that have iconic products. So it's just kind of like establishing yourself as one of those brands and just, having the Tory Burch bag be the thing, having the Tory Burch sandals be the thing. And then, the idea is that you're so good that people will buy your stuff no matter what. I think that's an optimistic way of looking at things because people are just not spending money. How do you make people spend money? And we're at a point where we still don't know. Obviously, they're a private company. They're not telling us what sales are like, but they're telling us that their revenues will be down by 20% this year, and it could be more. They said, if there's a second wave, we're ready for what comes. We know how to shut our stores. We know how to pivot to more e-commerce and things like that. But at the same time, there's still so many unknowns, and the consumer psyche is still, more cautious. Discretionary spending is down by a lot. Almost 30% of luxury sales in North America and Europe were done by Chinese travelers. People are not traveling. You can be as optimistic and you can pivot as much as you like, but at the same time, the pandemic will always be an issue as long as it lasts.
I think throughout my life, I'd always taken such attention to how others felt, and Real is the best manifestation of my life's work, hoping to help. I'm Ariella Safira. I'm the founder and CEO of Real, and I am 27 years old. Real is a mental health care company really bringing a new therapy model to life. We're not simply putting one-on-one care online, rather we're taking 10 steps back and asking, what are the goals of a mental health care system, and how can we bring that to life in a way that is affordable for the entire country, in a way that actually works, actually improves our mental health, and in a way that people are actually proud to take part in. I became passionate about mental health care when I was an undergrad, a sophomore at Stanford, when a friend had attempted to take her own life. Her experience in rehab was the first time she had ever encountered the mental health care system. Very immediately, I thought, imagine a world where someone never meets a primary care doctor until they're diagnosed with cancer, right? This system is failing us if people aren't even meeting it until they reach rock bottom. I thought the system didn't make sense, so I threw myself at it. I got in touch with David Kelly, who's a founder of IDEO, and we hit it off, ended up spending 2 to 3 years working together on how can we redesign mental health care. At that point, as I'd mentioned, the goal was not to just get more people to one-on-one care, but rather how can this be a part of our everyday, of our family systems, of our conversations at dinner, much like, we see fitness is. I think being under 30 in mental health care is one of my greatest advantages. I think that healthcare has not been disrupted, and it is so hard to envision a new version of an industry when you've lived in it for years. I get to have such a fresh pair of eyes and to envision a completely different future.
My name is Imana Bouzaid. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Equitable Health. So I'm originally from Sudan, and I've lived in several countries, including Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and the UK. I moved to the US when I was 24 years old. Both my grandfathers were entrepreneurs, and so I'm a very risk-taking person. And also, both my parents are immigrants as well, so they really instilled the importance of hard work and whatever you choose to do, make sure you do it to the best of your abilities. Healthcare is the biggest labor sector in the country. Our demand for healthcare as a country keeps going up as our population is aging. The supply of healthcare workers has not kept up with that demand. Another thing we discovered as we were, really digging into this is that the software and the technology and the processes and tools that hospitals and health systems use for hiring really hasn't changed since the late 90s. And so we figured there just has to be an easier way. I'm a medical doctor by background. I don't practice at all anymore, but a lot of my family members and friends are doctors and surgeons. They were actually complaining about understaffing, and that's been going on for many years. And at the same time, my co-founder, Rowan Portlock, he has many family members who are nurses, and they were saying I'm experienced and I'm qualified, but I apply to 10, 15 places, I usually don't even hear back. And if I hear back, it can take a couple of months. So Incredible Health is the fastest growing career marketplace for healthcare workers in the country. Our mission is to help healthcare professionals live better lives and help them find and do their best work. Hospitals and health systems, they use our custom matching technology to hire high quality nurses in permanent roles in 20 days or less. The national average is 90 days. So we dramatically accelerate that. We already work with over 500 hospitals and health systems across the country. The way we cut down the hire time to 20 days or less, number one, on our marketplace, the employers apply to the talent instead of the other way around. The second is we've built pre-screening and pre-vetting technology that automatically vets the talent. And then the third and probably most important piece is our custom matching algorithms. So let's say you are a recruiter at Kaiser Permanente or at Baylor Scott & White or Jefferson Health, and you log in, you don't want to see 200 nurses, you want to see 11 that are the exact right fit for you at the time. And that's what our custom matching algorithms enable. Same thing from the nurse's perspective. Let's say you're a highly sought after ICU nurse or OR nurse. You don't want to hear from 100 employers, you want to hear from 4 or 5 that are the right fit for you. The other thing we're able to achieve is dramatic cost savings for the hospital. So for every facility that we work with, we save at least $2 million in contract worker or travel nurse costs, overtime costs, and HR costs. Adoption of the healthcare industry of technology has changed dramatically, especially in the last few years. And hospital executives are much more open to adopting technology that makes their operations more efficient. So the way I feel about running a high-growth startup is, not only is it exciting, but it's extremely motivating. Our mission is huge. We want to help healthcare professionals live better lives. We're trying to help them find and do their best work. What we're all doing together, our team as well as with both the employers and the healthcare workers, is that we're defining a new category and we're becoming the market leading company in healthcare labor. And we're trying to transform this industry that we're in. And so that just means that, when there are bumps on the road, you just go right past. On a personal note, I'm an MD by background, and I think healthcare workers are some of the most overworked and underappreciated workers in the country. And we just wanted to create a product, a service that gives them the most delightful experience possible, because that's not what they're accustomed to.
I founded this company after getting my period in public. I was in the bathroom, I had my period, I was searching for a quarter, and I'm thinking to myself, if toilet paper is offered, why aren't tampons and pads? And this was, 4 or 5 years ago. It just kept coming back to me, and I did research. Nobody else had solved this problem, and so eventually I left university to found what is now known as OntFlow. We designed and developed a free vend tampon and pad dispenser so that no one ever has to worry about getting their period in public, right? Current solution is a coin-operated tampon and pad dispenser. Nobody carries around quarters, and so we've created a way that nobody ever has to worry about getting their period in public. The benefits of starting a company when you're really young is you're naive to all of the challenges, right? And so being able to leverage my youth and naivete really allowed me to take risks early on. And now as we continue to grow, my goal is that we continue to take risks, even knowing some of the downsides. Our company has raised $2.7 million. And when I started the company, I knew nothing about venture capital, right? I grew up in Toledo, Ohio. And so I learned about venture capital through Techstars. I went through New York City Techstars Accelerator, and I saw all these other people raising money. And I thought, wow, I think I can do that too. That being said, it's always been a challenge. I had to learn everything about venture capital, ranging from the 3-letter acronyms to how VCs operate and what their returns look like. And so it's been very challenging, but I'm grateful that we've stuck with it, and I can see other people's success and know that I too can raise the capital and provide the returns that our venture capitalists are looking for. I am most proud of the market that we built. When I founded the company, investors were like, there's no market for this. There's no market for B2B tampons and pads. And now 6 states have passed legislation requiring middle schools to offer free menstrual products in their bathrooms. We've worked with organizations that aren't even required to offer products, that want to ensure that their employees, guests, and students have access to these basic necessities.
In 1980, I came to United States pursuing my master's degree. In 1982, I started selling $5 digital watch in the flea market. If I make $20 a day, I was happy because $20 to me is I have a food and gas money. I met my wife in Flushing. We both working very hard, day and night, and selling gold jewelry in the flea market. We opened our first jewelry and watch store on Long Island. But I have a vision. My vision is Flushing. Flushing is largest Chinese community in the East Coast. Chinese are very loyal name brand, and they are buying luxury goods. So 10 years ago, I had an opportunity to open a large-scale jewelry store on the downtown Flushing. Today, I'm very proud of my 3 children. They are running the day-to-day business.
Growing up, I saw how hard my parents worked, and I saw how much their business meant to them and how much they put into it, that it made me want to help them out.
I graduated from Carnegie Mellon University, and the business was really starting to pick up to where it is today. So I joined at that time to help out, and I never really left after that. It's been really a blessing in disguise to work with my family, just because you develop these really raw and honest relationships that you mostly won't develop if you weren't working with your family.
I remember one day I was driving to work and I get a call from my dad. He's like, hey, Derek, would you consider coming back home to New York? Because I was in Florida at the time. And I was like, okay, what's going on? And he was like, oh, your mom, Lisa, she just got cancer. I remember pulling over, and I was crying in my car, and then I just emailed my boss right away, hey, I got a family emergency, I gotta head home. I stayed home with my mom to help take care of her, and unfortunately in December of 2015, she passed away from a rare cancer. I got to see through her life, how much energy and work she put into the business with my dad. And if I don't come into the business, it would have been for nothing. I can't let that happen because, my mom's not asking me, but I should do it because it's the right thing now. So definitely there's a generational gap. I mean, we always butt heads almost every day.
I feel like you have your moments where you fight and you're just, but when you fight, it's different from fighting with your coworkers or something. It's just more it's your family. But then maybe 10 minutes later, you're you forgive each other and you're okay, I'm calm, I understand what you're saying.
We always joke with my dad. He's like, when I was your age, I used to do everything in the store. And we're always like, yeah, but Dad, now we're doing everything you did. Plus we have the speed of the internet of people reaching out to us, contacting us. Everything is much faster.
Yeah, I think he's definitely more open to new ideas now. I think the goal for us is to just do it. And if it succeeds, then he's open to it. And if it doesn't succeed, then we try something else.
New video tonight showing the moment a man shoved a 52-year-old woman to the ground outside a bakery in Queens, causing her to hit her head so hard she needed at least a half-dozen stitches.
We are Chinese, but we are also American. And we work here, we work hard, we pay taxes, we are American.
It's definitely been really terrifying to see all the crimes that's on the news, and it's really heartbreaking to see the attacks, especially on the elderly.
If I ride the train, I'm really worried, and I also think not just for other people, but if something happens to someone, am I prepared to jump in? We see celebrities, like we see Daniel Day Kim and Olivia Munn, they're coming together and talking about Stop Asian Hate, and they have huge voices. And I think that not just from them, but also from our local community, like stores like us, who need to speak up. We've been here for a long time, and we're part of the history of this country. And that what we bring is pretty much our culture and our food, and all the good things that everyone loves to experience. And we just want to get back to that time.
Especially as an Asian American, you don't really see many Asian American jewelry stores that actually get passed down to generations. So that's something I definitely want for our family and for this community. And also, like, there's been so many restaurants been coming up, and like a lot of people have been discovering like Flushing, and Flushing growing bigger as a community. So it's been great to see that, and I think that our store has definitely helped make that impact to make all the changes, the new changes that are coming in.
This is my American dream. I want to be successful, and I want my children continuing running the business, make Carat & Co. more powerful, and make a customer happy. That's our goal.
I don't think I've ever told him, but my goal for him is I want him to live comfortably and not worry about work or anything, and just let us take all the stress and worries. He worked so hard, and he deserves to just enjoy his life.
My mom was all about, always give it your 120%. It was always this concept of that extra 20%, that's the difference between a good result and an exceptional result. That was really instilled in me very early on, and it tends to be true with everything I've done so far. I'm Tarek, I'm co-founder and CEO at Kalshi, and I'm 25. Kalshi is a financial exchange that allows people to trade on the outcome of events. So the way I always like to describe it is that we're developing a new asset class. So the same way that you can trade equities and commodities and rates, you can now trade on this thing called event contracts, where you can essentially simply buy yes and no shares on whether Brexit is going to happen, whether COVID is going to get worse this fall, or whether it's going to rain tomorrow. I think the novelty with Kalshi is that we're the first federally regulated exchange that is allowed to do this. My co-founder Luan and I took 2.5 years to get it regulated, and we finally got to launch this year. I was always really into math. I was the math nerd in class. And so that sort of, led me to get into MIT. It was a big dream of mine when I was growing up, math nerd, MIT made sense. And at MIT I got exposed to finance, which felt like this was something that was really appealing to me. And then I realized in finance, it was something about it. I liked being a trader, but that wasn't what I wanted to do. I was more interested in the structure of the whole system. I got obsessed about financial history, and then this is when Luana was telling me about the idea, and it all fit together. It was like, I love finance. It's going to be hard, which I think felt really exciting. There was one day where Luana convinced me to both of us called 65 lawyers in one day, all of which said, absolutely not, we're not touching this. This is not gonna happen. People have been trying since the 80s and 90s, and it's not happening. And we kept on pushing till we finally got regulated on November 3rd, 2020, actually the day of the elections. We basically unlocked a whole new asset class for the US. I think the 10-year vision is we want to live in a world where event contracts are something that's commonplace. There's a really big market that hopefully, would leave us with some amount of legacy.
Tesla's having a great year. This month, the electric vehicle maker became the first car maker to hit a $1 trillion valuation. But 15 years ago, it wasn't certain that the company would be where it is today. And the CEO who introduced the company's first roadster in 2006 wouldn't become the face of the company or a billionaire.
Tesla's early days, from its founding in 2003 until about 2006, were an exciting and very volatile time for the company. Its two original founders, Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpenning, had come together with this idea to create an electric sports car because there really was nothing like that on the market at the time.
But around 2004, J.B. Straubel and Elon Musk arrived at Tesla.
They had some funding, but not nearly enough to start something as elaborate and cost and cash intensive as a new auto company. So in 2004, Eberhard and Tarpenning came across Elon Musk, who had recently made a considerable amount of money from the sale of his stake in PayPal. Musk loved the idea for an electric vehicle and agreed to be their principal initial funder, putting the first major investment into the company in 2004.
Musk and Stachel developed a friendship and a common vision about what they wanted to do in the electric vehicle space. And over time, both of them became much more influential in the direction Tesla was taking. Although Eberhard and Tarpenning came up with the original idea and brought on a third engineer, Ian Wright, those three men did not end up becoming billionaires as a result of Tesla's surge in shares over the past year. In large part, that's because Eberhard and Tarpenning's original stakes were diluted significantly.
Over the years, each time the company arranged an additional funding round to raise more capital because making cars is very expensive. With each of those new funding rounds, it further diluted the holdings that Eberhard and Tarpenning had because they were not at the same time investing their own money to maintain their existing stakes. In fact, there were a series of 9 funding rounds for Tesla between 2004 up until its IPO in 2010.
Ian Wright left the company in 2004, even before the public debut of the Roadster electric sports car. Wright has said he did not hold on to any of his Tesla shares, saying he could never imagine the company would end up being worth $1 trillion. And by 2007, Eberhard was forced out as CEO. Tarpenning left a few months later. At the time, both men each held less than 5% in Tesla shares. Stachel, who left Tesla in 2019, is likely to have attained billionaire status from his holdings. His stake may be worth about $1.3 billion, assuming he retains a significant portion of Tesla stock that he held when he left. Stachel declined to comment for this story.
There were a series of other CEOs that were tapped to replace Eberhard, none of whom lasted very long, until Musk himself took control of the company a year later in 2008. Elon Musk was fairly strategic all along. His early money in Tesla brought the company to life. And through each subsequent funding round, he continued to invest more in the company, maintaining the largest stake of any individual investor. The company on November 1st crossed the 1 trillion valuation mark, and no one was a bigger beneficiary of that than Elon Musk. He currently owns approximately 20% of the company, and his stake in Tesla, as well as his investments in SpaceX and his other companies, have increased his net worth to an estimated $300 billion, making him the wealthiest person on the planet. So that early bet that he made on Tesla ultimately paid off far better than he or anyone else could have ever imagined.
Cafe Cafe is Kansas City's first Vietnamese coffee shop. So it is essentially a coffee shop on wheels, and we specialize in amplifying the Asian narrative by including all flavor profiles of Vietnamese coffee, and all of our coffee beans are from Vietnam. So before the pandemic, I spent 10 years in New York being an actor. I studied musical theater in college, and I did a lot of touring productions of various Broadway shows. And most recently, right before the pandemic, I was on the Broadway revival tour of Miss Saigon. While I was on the road with Miss Saigon, I had taken a trip to Vietnam during one of our breaks, and it really inspired me to be a little bit more involved in my community and in my culture. So I'm a first generation Vietnamese American. I'm the first one in my family to be born here. So when I took the trip to Vietnam, it really resonated with me that there were a lot of things about my culture and a lot of things about myself that felt untapped. And while I was on the road, I kept thinking, I want to do something for my community. I want to do something that is more than a line on a resume, essentially. And I got the idea of starting a coffee shop because the coffee culture in Vietnam is just like incredible. It's super dope, but I didn't plan on doing it this soon. The pandemic hit and we were out of a job. So our show stopped completely. We were out of work, and then our show got canceled, like for real. So I didn't have a job to go back to. And at the time I was living out of a suitcase for like almost 18 months. Miss Saigon had come to Kansas City for 2 weeks. And while we were here, we were just enamored by the city. And I thought, wow, this would be really cool to start my coffee shop here, you know? So because of the pandemic, I didn't have anywhere to go. So we came here and I said, you know what, I'm gonna jump and let's just do it. It is a mobile coffee shop right now because during the pandemic, I wasn't able to receive a loan or any funding because everything was being shut down so much. I took every penny that I had from savings, which was like 10 grand. And then I also did a Kickstarter where I asked the community of Kansas City to essentially help me. And that's all. I started with that and I just did everything myself. I still do a lot myself, like 95% of it myself, including like social media, photos, all the pop-ups, all of the labor. Up until last month was all me. We started off, you know, sales were like really low because I was just doing a small lemonade stand. Essentially I was just setting up a table, having some Vietnamese lemonade and Vietnamese coffee at a table and like serving it that way just to get my name out there. When I first saw my balance sheet and I realizing we were really making a lot of money, it was almost a shock because I'm not used to big figures like that. And the speed of which we got there, I mean, I'm just talking like within a month we doubled and then in a month we tripled. So that was crazy to be like, oh my God, not only is this becoming popular on social media, but on paper and like the numbers, it was actually becoming lucrative. You know, I could actually make a living. I could pay my employees, you know. It was a shock and it was also legit. At first, building our business was difficult financially because of the pandemic. Then it became difficult because we were so loud and we were so outspoken about being Asian. And we felt like the temperature of the country was just really unbearable because of all of the attacks. But what we found was that because we continued to be strong in our opinions and we continued to fight for, you know, the Asian community in town, we found that the community itself was so much more supportive than we could have ever imagined. We threw a Stop Asian Hate Vigil for Kansas City, where over 500 people showed up, and we taught everyone how to light incense. So we did an incense tribute instead of a candlelit vigil, and that was just so magical and so amazing because we saw Kansas City come out. They were like, yeah, we want to be there for you. We want to show you that you're safe here and that we don't want anyone to attack you either. We felt targeted a few times, and so we've like closed down our shop to give ourselves just like some space to feel safe. But as a result of our vigil, Kansas City and the mayor of Kansas City declared May to officially be AAPI Heritage Month in the city of Kansas City. And we, as a coffee shop, were able to speak with the mayor that day. We got like an official decree. It was awesome. And so I feel like there's been good and bad with this shop, but overall, it's just been better for us. And we've helped the community recognize that, hey, there is a community here and it deserves to have a platform as well. Being an Asian woman and having a brand and a company where being Asian is at the forefront of our brand and of our company, that's been so rewarding because I've gotten hundreds of DMs and messages and emails from other Asian people thanking me for doing this. And I knew that there needed to be more things and more businesses that made being Asian super cool. And I've tried really hard to build this brand to make other Asian kids out there be like, that's cool, and I feel cool, and I feel seen, and I feel heard. So that's probably been like the most rewarding because we've created the space for that reason. We wanted to amplify the narrative within the Midwest, where Asians aren't as heard or recognized and feel more invisible in these areas of the country. And being able to kind of look at my shop and be like, I did that. Like, that's really cool.
Most jobs equate to the title, and as you get promoted, your title changes. The CEO is a title which stays with you forever, but your job changes every chapter. And so I'm just trying to keep up with that change and what I need to do on a day-to-day basis as the company scales and as everything grows with it. My name is Ariel Katz. I'm the CEO of a company called H1. I am 28 years old. Imagine a place where you could learn everything about every doctor you ever want to know. If you're a patient trying to find a doctor to go see, if you're a life sciences company trying to find a doctor to work on your clinical trial, a hospital to recruit a doctor, we have 10 million doctor profiles out of the 15 million doctors in the world, kept up to date every single day with everything about them. And it's really changing the way the healthcare ecosystem connects with each other. I've been working on this for about 10 years. My first company called Research Connection, I learned all about how academia and medical research collaborate with each other, and how industry and medical societies collaborate with each other. And through that experience, we started that company, we sold that business. I learned a lot how there's $40 billion a year funding medical research in the US, and there's no real great way to track that, to make the right investment decisions, to find the right doctor to collaborate with. I've been thinking about this problem for my entire professional career, and that's why we started H1 about 4 years ago, to solve this problem. First, I went to non-for-profits and said, you're funding medical research. Wouldn't it be nice if you could tell your donors how that's going? And they said that this is not the way they operate. Then I went to the government and tried to talk to them about how you can make more quantitative decisions with your investments, and they weren't as interested. And then I went to life sciences companies and said, hey, you're funding billions of dollars in research every single year. What if I could tell you the right doctor to run your clinical trial? Is that interesting to you? And they clamored on that. And then we went to Y Combinator, and then we raised our seed, our A and our B within 8 months during the pandemic. In 10 years, any place on the internet where you see doctor information, it's going to be powered by H1. I almost guarantee it. As for myself, I'm only in this to achieve the mission, to create a healthier future by connecting the healthcare ecosystem. Once we achieve the mission, I'm happy.
I know it might be hard to believe, but Tyler and Cameron Winklevoss, who the world got to know as the villains of the social network, who Mark Zuckerberg famously duped and turned their idea into one of the biggest companies in the world, might actually be at the forefront of a counterculture movement. I think from the outside, the world kind of wants to not like these guys. They're 6'5", blonde, Harvard grads. They grew up in Connecticut. Their father was wealthy. They seem to have everything going for them. And yet, after being shunned by the mainstream venture capital community and being cut out of venture capital deals that Facebook had quite frankly overwhelmed, they went a different direction and found traction amongst the cryptographers and the counterculture world who are building the foundation of a new financial and global way of doing business. In the dozen years since Tyler and Cameron battled with Mark Zuckerberg, they've accumulated a fortune of $3 billion each. Everybody was skeptical about the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency world for years. They were even more skeptical about Tyler and Cameron Winklevoss.
We were not financial experts when we came to Bitcoin early on. We bought a lot of crypto on Mt. Gox, which famously imploded, and very few people were believers who actually imagined where this could go. So we thought for this to go mainstream, for this technology revolution to really happen, we have to build reliable, safe, trusted infrastructure.
In 2014, they founded the Gemini cryptocurrency exchange. Unlike their nemesis, whose mantra was move fast and break things, Tyler and Cameron Winklevoss embraced an ask permission, not forgiveness mentality. Gemini is one of the most regulated cryptocurrency exchanges in the world, and while adoption for them has been slower than for some of the other bigger exchanges, they might be prepared for what some believe is the incoming onslaught of institutional adopters.
It started with building a bridge into the future of money and then more recently, a bridge into the future of art. We think art should be digital. NFTs solve the digital scarcity problem.
In 2019, they acquired Nifty Gateway in exchange for NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, that are now taking the world by storm. No, I have to talk about the twins, don't I? The other twins. Nifty Gateway was also founded by two twins, Duncan and Griffin Cockfoster. And in fact, these weren't just any two twins, they were two competitive rowers. What had started off as just a way to use your credit card to buy NFTs was about ready to become an entire marketplace for NFTs and a place to securely store them.
Quite frankly, as we move more and more closer to the metaverse, you'll want art in your online world.
I need to ask you, since you use it, if you could just please define it. What is the metaverse?
The metaverse is the recreation of the offline world in the online setting. I think a good example of the metaverse would be Fortnite, where people have signed in and they even have held concerts. In the early days, it was totally unclear whether people were actually going to move on to this platform. And we saw that with social networking. There was so much skepticism around, will people actually share their stuff online and do this? And of course, we know how that's gone. Today, data of a social network is owned by that company. And in the future, we believe it will be owned by the individual who provides that data, whether it's photos or content or whatever. They will own that content and it's theirs. And quite frankly, it is theirs rightfully. We believe that.
If you take a close look at the companies, not only that they're building, but the companies they're investing in, you can start to read between the lines that a narrative is developing that what they are building could someday disintermediate Facebook, Amazon, Google, and many other centralized companies. The world that Tyler and Cameron accidentally ended up finding themselves in might actually make them the perfect nemesis for Facebook in a way that not even they ever imagined.
I think that there is so much value in having diversity in venture. We can spur a lot of economic innovation from different spaces if we have different viewpoints involved. My name is Paige Doherty. I'm one of the founding partners of Behind Genius Ventures, which is an early stage venture firm, and I'm also the author of an illustrated children's book about venture capital. It's called Seed to Harvest. It's a simple explanation of venture capital. It goes through a lot of different how venture investors look at the world and evaluate companies, and it's some of the concepts like sourcing, which you can see here, the farmers selecting their seeds, and here is the companies. I honestly wanted to write this book so I could explain to my parents what I wanted to do. My dad's an engineer and my mom's an artist, and didn't really have any context for tech. And now I have a bigger purpose with it, to inspire young women and people of color to get interested in venture investing specifically, because I think that there's an incredible impact that can be had. I think that you can come from any background and be successful. It's all about knowledge, access, and connections. In terms of what I want my legacy to be, is I want every little girl to think that she has the option to work in venture. Not necessarily go into it, but have the option to. I think being a very public figure in venture for me is important, so that I can reach those people that may come from different backgrounds and not have had the resources that were made available to others. I thought when I was growing up that venture meant you had to come from generational wealth, which I think is a fundamental untruth. So my whole goal with what I'm doing with Behind Genius Ventures and writing this book is to broaden and make venture more transparent so that more people can have a seat at the table.